This is Stephen Reily, Director of the Speed Museum, welcoming you to our 4th virtual After Hours. We reopened the museum at the beginning of July, and we also relaunched our programming, which we can't deliver in person, so we're bringing it to you at home. We're going to keep offering it this way for the foreseeable future, and you can also find it on YouTube after the event, where we're also going to show individual segments will be segmented in a way that you can watch and share with others. This month's After Hours is entirely devoted to Loose Nuts, Bert Hurley's West End story, an exhibit we opened last November. It shares the 128-page handmade book that virtually unknown artist unknown in his lifetime, Bert Hurley, created. A love song, a comic thriller, a graphic novel, all about Louisville's West End. Our curator, Kim Spence, identifies the 80 characters who were based on real people in Bert Hurley's life and the West End of the 1930s. And this work has inspired our After Hours this month. Before I tell you what you're going to see, I want to thank Brown-Forman, which sponsors half of all After Hours and is joining us this month with its brand Cooper's Craft. And we're going to have a mixologist from Cooper's Craft coming showing you how to make mocktails and cocktails during the next hour. Kim Spence herself is going to be joining in a conversation with Dr. Gerald Smith, a leading professor of African American Studies and Black Kentucky history at the University of Kentucky. So stay tuned for that, a deep dive into the Black history underlying this important exhibit. And after that, this exhibit is going to come to life in a brand new way. And people from U of L's Repertory Theater are going to bring a dramatic table reading in costume with props, bringing the words and the story of Loose Nuts to life. I can't wait to see it, and it may give us an idea about how to continue to give life to Loose Nuts after this exhibit comes down next month. So enjoy the next hour. I'll be back during the break to tell you what's in store for the second hour, and welcome to After Hours.
Good evening, Speed Museum, and welcome to After Hours. My name is Fitz Bailey, and I'm the National Brand Ambassador for Cooper's Craft Kentucky Straight Bourbon, made right here in Louisville, Kentucky. And tonight, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why the barrel is so important to the bourbon. To get started, the Brown-Forman Corporation, in addition to being the proud parent company of Cooper's Craft Kentucky Straight Bourbon, is also the largest distiller in the world that makes their own barrels. Every year, we make 600,000 barrels, 2,500 barrels a day, 1 barrel every 90 seconds. And to give you an idea, it takes me about 15 minutes to make a barrel. So production is thrilled that I could be talking to you all tonight instead of raising barrels. Not only do they make all those barrels, but they've been doing it for quite a while. We've had our cooperage since 1945, which means this year is the 75th anniversary of owning our cooperage. In addition, we have several employees that have been with us for over 50 years, as well as a grandfather, father, and niece that all work at our cooperage. It's a really fun experience, one of a kind. We're not doing tours at the moment, but once we resume, please come check us out. I'd love to give you a personalized tour myself. But why is the barrel so important to the bourbon? Well, one of the big rules for bourbon is that it has to be aged in a new, unused, charred white oak barrel. No matter what, if it's Cooper's Craft, Old Forester, Woodford Reserve, whatever your favorite is, they all have to follow that rule. The reason is the barrel is going to give the bourbon 100% of its color, 50% of its flavor. So the bourbon's going to go in looking just clear like vodka or gin, but it's going to come out with that rich amber color that you know and love. So as it's sitting in the barrel, it's going to heat up on the outside and the wood opens up. The pores in the wood that normally water would pass through, the bourbon's going to get in there. And as it's working its way through, it's pulling out those wonderful vanillas, caramels. As it cools down, the wood tightens and pushes the bourbon out. And as the bourbon leaves, it takes those flavors and the color with it. So the longer it's in there, the more flavor it's going to pull. So you'll see a lot of age statements. And the higher up the age, the more of that oak flavor is going to be in there. It's a really cool experience. With Cooper's Craft, we do something a little bit special. We have our Cooper's Barrel Reserve. We will take the barrel and we do something called chiseling and charring. So we will cut into the barrel, and these are going to allow the bourbon to get 50% more surface area and pull 50% more flavor out of the barrel. In addition, as we're cutting, we're leaving all this sawdust that comes out into the bottom of the barrel, and we end up with about 6 to 8 inches of sawdust just sitting in this barrel. As we fill it up with bourbon, that sawdust collects into almost like a bourbon tea bag, giving us even more flavor. So this is a very bold, robust bourbon with flavors of stone fruit, leather, smoke, and a rich, like almost cooking vanilla. It's a delicious, delicious bourbon. I strongly recommend you try it out. And I'm even going to show you an easy cocktail with it. So this is called a Boulevardier. This is a cocktail that was invented in Paris, France in the late 1920s at Harry's New York bar. Super easy. Go ahead and grab yourself a coupe glass. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 1.5 ounces of our Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve, and then 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, and then 1 ounce of a aperitif. So I'm using Campari, and this is going to give the drink a wonderful color. So get that all in there. Now, there's no citrus, so you want to stir this drink, because when you shake them, you end up watering the drink down, which is great when there's lemon juice, but when it's whiskey forward like this, you really don't want that. So once it's nice and chilled, we're going to strain this into our beautiful coupe glass right here. Excellent. See, it's almost got this very nice holiday color to it. It's perfect for the cooler weather. Last thing, you want to garnish it with a little bit of a orange twist. So we're going to express this. So we're going to pinch the orange twist over the cocktail. It's going to release all the oils in there and give some wonderful body and flavor to the cocktail. This drink is known for being super balanced, and it's very easy to do and great to batch. Look at that. Super easy. Very fun little cocktail. But maybe you're not drinking tonight, or maybe you don't drink ever. That's also fine. I have a delicious mocktail recipe for you. So if you've ever heard of a French 75, that's a drink normally made with lemon juice, simple syrup, gin, and champagne. This is a Kentucky 37.5 because there's no alcohol in it. So for this, you will want to shake. Go ahead and get your ice-filled shaker, and we're going to use 1 ounce of lemon juice and ½ an ounce of simple syrup. I'm just going to shake this up to get it nice and chilled. Now, this drink, you can either use sparkling grape juice, or because it's getting a little fall, I thought I would use some sparkling apple cider. Go ahead and get a little twist of lemon for your garnish. We'll pour our mixture in there. Top it off with a little delicious apple cider or sparkling grape juice. And we're almost done. There's one last thing. So I really enjoy adding just a couple drops of bitters to this. And you can go and do lemon bitters or orange bitters. I'm using some pecan magnolia habanero because it actually pairs really well with this drink. And just a few little drops. And if you have a toothpick, you can make a little bit of artwork on there. I'm just going to use my little spoon to just stir that top, and perfect. Easy mocktail, delicious. I think you're gonna love it. Thank you for stopping by the Speed Museum. Enjoy after hours, and cheers.
Good evening. My name is Kim Spence, and I'm the Director of Collections and Exhibitions and the Curator of Works on Paper at the Speed Art Museum. Joining me tonight to talk about the current exhibition, Loose Nuts, Bert Hurley's West End Story, is the distinguished scholar of African American history, Dr. Gerald L. Smith. A native of Lexington, Dr. Smith earned his BA, MA, and PhD degrees in history from the University of Kentucky. He's a full professor of history and a former holder of both the Theodore A. Howman Professorship and the Martin Luther King Center Scholar in Residence at UK. He also serves as pastor of the Pilgrim Baptist Church in Lexington. Dr. Smith is extensively published, contributing more than 40 articles, essays, and book reviews to historical journals and encyclopedias. He's the co-editor of the award-winning Kentucky African American Encyclopedia, which was recognized as the Thomas D. Clark Medallion Book in 2015, and was awarded the Kentucky Historical Society's Publication Award in 2016. In 2014, the Commonwealth of Kentucky's Personnel Cabinet presented him with the annual Charles W. Anderson Laureate Medal Award, its highest award given to individuals in recognition of their significant contributions for equal opportunities in their community. Dr. Smith currently serves as co-chair of Lexington's Commission for Racial Justice and Equity. Dr. Smith, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. I thought to get us started tonight, I'd give everyone a brief overview of the exhibition. So I'm going to share my screen and show some images from the exhibition to get us started. As some people in our audience may know, Bert Hurley was an African-American artist who grew up in Louisville's West End, in a neighborhood now known as Russell. From the age of 16 until his death in 1955, Bert worked for the L&N Railroad Company in their general office building on Broadway. And although he received no formal training, he was a versatile musician, an author and poet, as well as a painter, sculptor, and talented draftsman. Loose Nuts, Bert Hurley's West End Story, is an exhibition featuring pages from a unique novella composed, entirely hand-lettered, and richly illustrated by Bert Hurley. It features over 80 characters based on real-life African-Americans living in Louisville during the 1930s. And as I've studied this manuscript, I've always been interested in the rich historic and cultural context that underlie and inform Hurley's manuscript. And Dr. Smith, I'm so pleased to have you with us tonight to share some of your insights into this background. One thing you and others have observed about the manuscript is the way in which Hurley's drawings really challenge racial stereotypes. I think these two pages, showing a garden party at the Watson estate and the interior of the Watson's family library, are just two drawings where we see this really clearly manifest. Do you agree?
Yes, yes.
And I wonder in what ways you think of these drawings as really kind of breaking racial stereotypes.
I see them as racial stereotypes, just sort of looking it in historical perspective, is that during the late 19th century, we find a number of anthropologists and biologists and historians who are promoting the notion of Anglo-Saxon superiority. This idea that African Americans were biologically, culturally, and intellectually inferior. There was quite a bit of focus on the African American body. This idea that the Black body was strange, that it was exotic, that it was other than, it was interesting. And of course, as we look through history, there's this experience that African Americans have regarding their bodies. You know, we know that about the lynchings, the castrations, the rapes, the mutilations, the whippings. And all of these things, of course, are manifested a little bit later on in the late 19th century with the production of these derogatory images of African Americans, mass produced to reinforce this idea of their inferiority. So we see houseware items and toys and postcards and paintings, and of course, lawn ornaments, advertisements for food items, all of these things projecting this idea that Black was ugly and deeply stained with dirt, that Black was evil, that white was pure and beautiful, promoting the idea that African Americans were lazy and violent and unintelligent. And these sort of images that were being portrayed, whether through postcards or whether through paintings, were often challenged and contradicted by artists and writers who wanted to portray a different image of African Americans. And so that's one of the things that we see in Bert Hurley's work.
And I think what you're saying appears so obviously in these drawings here. Social life in the West End plays throughout Bert's story, whether it's these glamorous private parties that we see here, or Central High football games, or references to more structured fraternal organizations like the Knights of Pythias. I wonder if you can tell us a bit about what the West End would have been like in the 1920s and 30s when Bert lived there, and the importance of these types of social outlets and organizations in a segregated society like Louisville. Their significance went far beyond just being a place to hang out, correct?
Yes, definitely. I think about, that period in time, section of Louisville, it reflected entertainment, exhilarating. It was an escape from the harsh realities of life in the South for African Americans. But it was a place also where they could go and appreciate it, acknowledged, have free activity to move around, to engage in fun and food and music and friendship and culture. The environment symbolized pride, symbolized possibilities, it symbolized the power that was within the African American community. And of course, we see that, in the kind of buildings that were being constructed and housed by various organizations. You see the Knights of Pythias Club there, that has a long and rich history, of course, at 930 West Chestnut Street. The Pythias Club itself centered on friendship and benevolence and charity. In Louisville, there were 11 lodges of the Pythias Club. And not only that, in 1925, the club held a national convention that where 25,000 delegates from around the nation came to be a part of that. The Top Hat Club, of course, was a place where you could come and not have to worry about being ignored or discriminated against, but you could be treated rightfully as a paying customer who just wanted to come and have a good time with the nightlife with their friends. And so that was the kind of environment, that we would see there.
And education played a key role in that as well, right? I mean, here's a photograph of the old Central Colored High School before it was renamed Central High School, and a photograph of students working in a chemistry lab. Can you tell us a bit about about education at this time?
Well, definitely. And, I might add, first of all, that, of course, that was one of the concerns that African Americans had immediately following the Civil War was not only purchase of land, but education first and foremost. And very, very much involved in this role was African American women, were some of your leading teachers with the establishment of the colored teachers of the Kentucky Colored Teachers Association, which would become the Kentucky Negro Education Association, established in 1877. You would have, the Kentucky Association of Colored Women's Clubs that were formed that promoted education, the construction of libraries, daycares, and of course there, Central Colored High School was, the Black high school for the city of Louisville, because throughout the state of Kentucky, there were a number of places where there was no secondary education available. So students would have to get on a bus and travel for miles just to get to the 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. The fact that Central Colored High School was not only there in the heart of the city, but was also one of the few that, had the sort of facilities and, had the materials and the reputation and the teachers who came from, some of the top schools, in the South, whether it was from Fisk or Howard or Tuskegee or Kentucky State College, for example, especially, made it even more attractive.
Yes. And I've always been intrigued by the fact that in his formative years as a teenager, Bert Hurley actually lived down the block from the Western Colored branch of the Louisville Free Public Library. And this was an incredible resource for African Americans in the community.
The Western Colored Library opened actually in, I think it was September 23rd, 1905, in a home initially, and then it was moved to 1125 West Chestnut Street. And not only was it the building, of course, it's one of the Carnegie buildings, but, it was also the staff that was led by Thomas Blue, who was a trained librarian, but also, made it his mission to train other librarians, and, they would be dispatched to other libraries throughout the South. So from that standpoint, the Western Colored branch, Louisville Free Public Library, is not only one of the first in the nation that was specifically for African Americans, providing the books and the access, but also as a training ground for those who might want to become librarians themselves.
Yeah. And other sites within the city the Allen Hotel, which was referenced in the Negro Motorist Green Book in the late 1930s. And also Chestnut Street YMCA, which were wonderful organizations and provided great opportunities for African Americans in the community.
Yes, yes. Because we could actually go on in terms of education in Louisville, whether it's the Louisville Municipal College, whether it's the Louisville Medical College, law, definitely Simmons College that we know today, but, has a long history. So that's one of the things that Louisville was very rich and blessed to have, those sort of educational institutions.
Yes. And not only education, but also, one of the early pages in Bert Hurley's manuscript features this ode to Walnut Street, which not only had theaters and nightclubs, but it was also really home to a thriving business district. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the Walnut Street Business District and the growth of African American entrepreneurship during the early 1900s, during the early 20th century.
Yeah, Walnut Street was considered to be the quote unquote the heart and soul of the Black community. Going back again to the mid 19th century, when we see immediately after slavery a number of skilled laborers who are now operating their own businesses, barbering, catering, blacksmiths. But, there were individuals, of course, in the latter part of the 19th century doing other things, whether beauticians or especially funeral homes were quite big. You have the establishment of A.D. Porter Funeral Home there in Louisville in 1907. Then there are tailor shops and saloons. And actually by 1932, you have about 140 African-American businesses there. In terms of entrepreneurship, by the early 20th century, there's Samuel Plato, you might recall, who established an architectural and building firm that, took on a number of national contracts. You have a photography studio, the Neighbors Photography Studio, Jesse Neighbors Photography Studio, Arthur Evans Photography Studio there on Walnut Street. And of course, by the early 1930s, there is even the Madam C.J. Walker Beauty School that opened up as well. So, all of these kinds of establishments, you can imagine, the kind of inspiration that they provided for those who were even thinking about going into business.
And right in the heart of all of this was the Mammoth Life building and the offices of the Louisville Leader, this African-American newspaper. And I find it so fun that in the early pages of Bert Hurley's manuscript, he sets himself in the role of a hard-nosed newspaper reporter working for a fictional newspaper, the West End Tattler. And very early on, his quest is to beat to the press his competitors, the Louisville Leader and Louisville News. And these real-life newspapers seemed like they were really an invaluable resource for the African-American community at the time.
Yes, for sure. They served as a source of communication, but also, I might add, for documentation to cover major and minor events and activities in the African-American community. Louisville had its newspapers, but of course, there were others throughout the state. Lexington had the Lexington Standard. In Berea College, they had the American Citizen. In Berea, they had the American Citizen. But Louisville had a number of African-American newspapers, from the Louisville Weekly, of course, and then, of course, you have the Louisville Defender. These newspapers that we have, you see the headlines right in front of us. What I have found interesting as a historian is in terms of how they zeroed in on what was happening specifically in the African-American community, how major events were impacting the lives of Black people. Because often, your regular white dailies did not cover what was going on in the African-American community. And so, how was the 1937 flood affecting African-Americans? How many were being evacuated? What sort of arrangements were being made for them to survive, this particular flood? What's going on not only within Louisville, but with the African-American newspapers. They typically had a correspondent who would travel throughout the state, especially in Louisville, the Louisville Leader, to find out what's going on in other communities in Kentucky and bring that news and publish it in the Louisville Leader or in the Louisville Defender. So I could read the Louisville Defender, or I could read the Louisville Leader, and I could find out what's going on in Lexington, or what's happening in Hopkinsville, or what's happening in Ashland, Kentucky. That one newspaper could basically serve as a window to what's going on throughout the state and other parts of the South as well.
Yes. And there were other publications as well that really brought to light really horrific tragedies within the community, as well as this political poster from 1943 shows.
Right. I think what's also important about these African American newspapers is that not only did they publicize sporting events and other encounters, who was visiting who from what particular city, but they were also especially significant in terms of combating racial discrimination, segregation, and police brutality. And that's what we have in front of us now. African American newspapers, the editors recognized very early on that how Black lives were being treated in white dailies compared to how they could be treated in African American dailies. And so you have a picture here of Miss Julia Wood, who was beaten by the police, taken out of the house, and she was charged for disorderly conduct. But it also gave an opportunity for African Americans to look at police brutality, but look at politics in the city. What are the Republicans and the Democrats doing, and how are they addressing the unfair treatment of African American citizens in this community? Take note of how white newspapers cover stories in our community, and how they use pejorative names to refer to the African American community, how they tell the story, and how they do not tell the whole story.
Yes. We have just a few more minutes, but one thing, when we were talking earlier this week, you made some fascinating observations and insights into scenes later in Hurley's manuscript when we enter into this very dramatic courtroom drama, where he casts real-life African-American lawyers in the roles of district attorneys and defense attorneys, and also the principal of Central Colored High School as one of the presiding judges, and how these scenes and Hurley focuses our attention on how justice is applied when African Americans are in positions of authority.
Yes, I thought that was quite interesting, in terms of how that was framed, because, one of the things the African American newspapers did, and there's the connection again, is that, they revealed and communicated to the Black community just how justice was being administered, that it was being administered unequally and not fairly, that African Americans were too often more likely to be accused, arrested, and prosecuted in jail, where whites were often exonerated. And so here you have an African American judge who is now providing an image of what justice actually looks like. They're in a role in which they're in control of everything, from the questions, the investigation, and how the whole situation is handled. I talked to you about African American agency, and in writing this particular piece and drawing this particular sketch, we see African Americans responding to oppression in a way that's not, very open. When we think about African American agency, what we're saying is that it is purely engaged activism. It's doing something with a made-up mind, with a specific agenda. So it's organized, and yet it's unorganized. It's visible, yet it's invisible. It's collective, yet at the same time, it's individual. And so what Hurley has chosen to do here is to give us an appreciation of agency in which African Americans are taking control of their own circumstances, and they're doing it in a way that whites are not doing that.
Well, Dr. Smith, this has been absolutely fascinating. And I want to thank you for sharing your time and your knowledge when you are in the midst of such important work on racial equity for the city of Lexington. Thank you so very much.
Can I just add one final thought?
Of
And it just
course.
occurred to me today about this as I give it a little bit more thought. What I see Hurley doing is actually providing us with a modern day understanding of soap operas, because it's essentially a soap opera wrapped up in one. You know, it's his expression of the African American community's bold and beautiful as the world turns. You know, it's his expression of the edge of night. It's his expression of days of our lives. But you know, it's his way of taking what he is experiencing and holding on to that even while he's working at the Illinois Railroad.
Oh, I love it. What a great insight. Thank you again so much. This has been so wonderful, and we've been delighted to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Next, I am truly pleased to have joining us tonight Sidney Monroe Williams, Assistant Professor in the U of L Department of Theater Arts. Sidney and I have been talking about a variation on tonight's partnership for over a year. We initially hoped to have a live performance in March in the Loft Gallery, surrounded by Bert Hurley's original drawings. But as we all well know by now, the coronavirus has encouraged us all to be more adaptable. So since then, we've seen many Hollywood stars such as Jennifer Aniston and Sterling K. Brown participating in virtual table reads. And we were thrilled when Sidney and their students agreed to produce their own version of a virtual table read, featuring excerpts from Bert Hurley's manuscript, Loose Nuts, for tonight's program. Sidney Monroe Williams is a community-based theater artist whose work is situated at the intersection of race, gender, and class. Through creative strategies, Sidney facilitates art making and conversations with communities to spark dialogue, raise visibility, celebrate marginalized bodies. Sidney holds a BA in International Relations from Hendrix College and an MFA in Drama and Theater for Youth and Communities from the University of Texas at Austin. And prior to joining the U of L's Theater Arts Department, they worked in nonprofit management of lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer youth programs ages 14 to 29 in Boston, Massachusetts at the Theater Offensive. Artistically, Sidney is interested in exploring queer theory and performance methodologies as a means to building more inclusive communities within and outside the theater. In 2019, they published an essay, Visual Mapping and Embodied Agency in Devising Critically Engaged Theater with Youth, the Performing Justice Project. And in 2020, an article in Theater Topics special issue on queer pedagogy, Learning My True Colors, Race, Sexuality, and Adultism in the LGBTQA Youth Theater. Sidney is currently writing and producing a one-person show, Nasty White Folks and Other Filth, that unpacks messages of cleanliness and challenges who has the privilege to be filthy. Sidney, welcome, and thank you so much for lending your talents as a theater director to this interpretation of Loose Nuts.
Hello, 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 and thank you for having me, Kim. We finally made it to this point, all that talk, all those meetings, all those emails, and we finally got here, so yay.
I'm so glad we were able to persevere and share the great production that you and your students came up with tonight. You know, looking back at our earliest conversations, you and I really talked about the way in which Bert Hurley's manuscript, even though it's written as a fictional novella, really lends itself to a theatrical interpretation. And, you know, this harkens back to what Dr. Smith was just saying about this being his own version of a soap opera. I wonder if you could share with us a bit about your vision as a director and your experience in directing the students in their readings from Loose Nuts.
Yeah, of course. You know, as Dr. Smith just commented, it's a soap opera. I think even Stephen Reily said it's a graphic novel. And there is so much culturally, artistically, historically operating within this manuscript. So when I got the initial email from you to kind of see if I was interested, I started perusing through the digital images you had sent me. And I just became fascinated that this one man had constructed, written, drew all of the illustrations and composed this manuscript. It was an amazing kind of composition, an anthropological document. I think in my vision for this evening and what we were trying to do, U of L is home of the African American Theater Program. And so we are one of the only theater departments in the country that really focuses on art making processes that is rooted within a Black diaspora kind of foundation. So to be here in Louisville and to have this fairly unknown kind of, I consider, celebrity, to have his work not be well known, I was like, this is a great opportunity for us to speak to the mission of the AATP, but then also to give our students some foundation in the history of Louisville and how it connects to Black culture here for many folks.
Well, thank you.
Oh, I was going to say, shouting out to, I didn't do it alone. And so I also had the help of undergraduate and graduate actors that you'll see in the performance. And then also a really good colleague here in the theater department, Melissa Kenney Shepherd, costume and accessorized us in that old Hollywood glamour.
Well, wonderful. Well, I'm eager to share this with everyone. May we have the video now, please?
Walnut Street.
A conglomeration of white duck pants,
linen caps,
Suspenders.
and fancy sports sweaters.
long flowing dresses of white and pastel shades,
Silk-clad legs.
patient medicine men,
Curbstone preachers.
Gigolos, skin men.
and ladies of the evening.
The odor of hot dogs.
Fish.
Hot chili and barbecue,
Beauty parlor.
Lucky Morris.
taxi stands,
And clothes for sale.
overalls,
Run over shoes.
Broken half-pint bottles.
and depression.
Walnut Street.
Trolley cars crawling along at a snail's pace, trying to force their way through a strangely assorted mass of vehicles.
Walnut Street, a continuous, monotonous murmur that presents the nightlife symphony.
Composition of a certain plane of life that begins with a common time of curiosity and graduates into the fast tempo of reckless abandon. A sensualist rhythm arranged around the melody of pleasure.
Off chords of despair and regret.
Walnut Street.
Walnut, Madison, Chestnut, Magazine.
Long rows of trees extending the length of the streets on both sides.
Like two long rows of sturdy sentinels on guard.
Seem to stretch their broad limbs protectingly over the long lines of beautiful homes.
And in the fall, borrowed the mixed tints of the glorious sunset.
held them suspended from wavering branches until the fierce, blustering winter winds swept them away.
Just like every other pretty avenue in every other city, West Walnut, Madison, Chestnut, and Madison Streets has its porches.
Its shrubbery and its flowers, its youths and maidens with ukuleles. It has its popular girls, its good-looking boys, its ambitious youths, and its dreamers.
The West End, twilight.
Roses, radios, ruffles,
Color, collegians, cars,
Marriages,
mothers, companies,
maidens,
and collectors.
music, and mortgages.
children playing hop, skip, jump, marking up the sidewalks with chalk.
Old grandmothers who used to take great pride in their pretty dolls.
Now sitting on the porches watching their granddaughters play baseball.
The West End at twilight.
In due time, I were presented to Miss Smith. Later, as she and I were strolling about the grounds, I said,
"You know, Catherine, Miss Smith, I've just been dying to meet you."
Really?
Is that the human thing to say after me sending you a valentine?
Oh, did I make 'em angry? Oh.
Don't do that.
Oh.
I forgot I were
I was thinking you were Alex.
And now look here, Catherine Smith, a lady of your standing does not go around pulling noses, do you?
Well, now, Bert, I am not a habitual nose puller. I just like to pull on Alex's nose. Goodness knows, his nose knows, you know. I know better. But, you see, it all started this way. We were playing one day, just chasing each other, wrestling, and so on. Alex was about to get away from me, and when I would grab after him, oh, he's so little, well, his nose was the only thing I could get a toehold on.
I understand perfectly.
I nodded, but I didn't. How could anyone get a toehold on a nose? But all this was getting me nowhere. I had to get the conversation into more serious channels.
I understand you are from abroad.
Yes, I've only been over here for several years. I were born and raised across the water. Sometimes I yearn for the sight of my native land. Those happy hours I spent there, the drives down the romantic Bud Road, the times we climbed to the summit of the picturesque Silver Hills, the thrill of speeding along 100 minutes a mile on the Main Street trolley. The old historical church on Main Street, second only to Notre Dame in ecclesiastical destination. Notre Dame had its hunchback, while this church had its clock. The only colored church in the world with a clock.
I beg your pardon? My church, that is, I went to a church where they had a clock.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I certainly did. I saw it with my own eyes up on the wall.
Oh, but this clock I have reference to is up in the steeple, so there.
I see. Well, tell me more about your native land.
Oh, there was the community Christmas tree on Market Street.
Catherine told me as she nervously picked the buttons off my coat and cut paper dolls out of the front of my shirt.
Oh, imagine I see it now. The old rolling mill, rolling. The dogs, dogging. The horses, horsing. The rats, ratting. And, oh, to think, I left it all.
I know how you feel, Catherine. Still, you could not have brought all that with you.
Telling me. But Bert, it nearly broke my pocketbook. My heart.
Don't. You will have me crying too. I too used to live in New Albany.
Then, unable to restrain the tears any longer, I began to weep on her shoulder. We had a good old-fashioned cry.
Did you break down too when you left your home?
No, I broke out. You see, Catherine, I used to be a good boy. I never carried matches or said, "Darn it," or went up dark alleys.
Yes, go on.
Then I met up with bad company, Coleman, Raymond, Chester, Probit, and look at me now, just a gigolo.
Pardon me, am I intruding?
Miss Rose. Catherine, Miss Smith and I were swapping experiences. You know, Miss Smith was born across the water. You should hear her paint word pictures of her picturesque native country. It is a privilege to listen to Miss Smith.
I would certainly like to hear about your native land, Miss Smith.
Miss Rhodes said, dropping down on one of the marble benches.
Let us save our energy for the dance tonight.
Miss Smith and I followed her suggestion. I sat between these two comely ladies and we conversed on general topics. We talked about half hour when I said to Miss Rhodes,
"By the way, won't you give me a little story for my paper?"
I'm sorry, Bert, but I never give interviews.
But you owe it to your public, Lottie. You don't want to be classed with Greta Garbo.
Are you implying that I have large feet?
Why, no, Lottie. You misconstrue my meaning. I were alluding to Greta Garbo's aloofness, her cheap pretense at seclusion.
A smile indicated the storm was over.
About your trip to Chicago. How do you like Chicago?
Oh, it wasn't so hot.
Meaning what?
Exactly what I said. It wasn't so hot. Were you ever in Chicago in the wintertime?
I see. Tell me, Lottie, what were your impressions of the Grand Terrace Cafe?
Your paper and the public were very much misinformed. I never visited the Grand Terrace.
Never visited the Grand Terrace? Why, I can't imagine anyone visiting Chicago without going there.
Well, it is not surprising you don't understand.
Lottie's face colored with anger. I hastened to amend by saying,
I meant, I don't see how you ignored their special invitation. Don't be angry.
Again, her smile returned.
What I meant, Bert, was if you cherished memories of the snow-capped mountains of St. Moritz, the mecca of winter sports, skiing, sledding, and skating, the whole countryside covered in a blanket of snow, creating a million diamonds sparkling in the sunshine. If you had watched the fog race from the River Thames, listened to the Westminster chimes, heard the dong-dong of Big Ben, the age-old ceremonies of the King's Guards changing watch, Downing Street of London's diplomatic activities, and Conan Doyle's stories. Bert, if you were ever thrilled by a Venetian sunset or explored the ruins of ancient Rome, drifted in a gondola along an enchanting moon that made spangles of light on the waters of Venice, a native serenader playing seducing music upon a guitar. If you had ever the singular experience of being delightfully refreshed with sparkling Bordeaux and Burgundy and dreadfully frightened by the covetous stares of some lustful apoche while slumming in the Montmartre and along the left bank of the Seine, the noted ateliers where good fellowship is always to be found, or mingling with the art students in the Latin colony.
Don't say any more, Lottie. Please. I understand. Miss Smith, did you?
Miss Smith had vanished.
When did she leave?
I don't know. I guess while we were crossing the ocean.
Stay around a while. Rhythm and romance, romance and rhythm. A combination so real. Whoa. An invitation to steal your heart.
This is Stephen Reily, and welcome back to a break from After Hours, and also an announcement of what you can expect in our next hour. This month's After Hours, our fourth virtual event, has been entirely inspired by the exhibit I'm standing in right now, Loose Nuts, Bert Hurley's West End story. And I want to thank L&N Credit Union for sponsoring this exhibit, which only has one more month to run. So please come see it soon. In our first hour, I want to call out Fitz Bailey from Cooper's Craft, and thank you, Brown-Forman, for another month of generous sponsorship. And thank you, Fitz, for your cocktail making recipes. Dr. Gerald Smith from UK, who joined Kim Spence in a conversation about Black history in Kentucky, and the Louisville Repertory Theater and their director, Sidney Monroe Williams. Thank you for bringing Bert Hurley's Loose Nuts to life through your dramatic table reading. The next hour is going to be just as exciting, and get ready for the first performance, which comes from Lipstick Wars Poetry, a platform that gives women and girls a chance to give voice to their feelings through poetry slams. Just as Bert Hurley gave life to his vision of his Louisville through Loose Nuts, these women and girls are going to give life to their vision of what his life is like for Black women in Louisville now. I should just warn you, they are practitioners of free expression, which we always welcome at the Speed, and you may hear a little bit of profanity in their performance. After that, I get to indulge one of my favorites, which is my director's cut conversations. And I've invited two important community leaders to join me in a conversation inspired by this exhibit. Jeana Dunlap and Lynnett Glass are the community investment specialists who lead Louisville's coordinated community investment project, which is looking at how to build a fabric together that allows more projects that deserve support and leaders and organizations to get support in West Louisville. Lynnett has both a master's in divinity and an MBA, and Jeana has a background in urban redevelopment in Louisville and was awarded a prestigious Loeb Fellowship from Harvard's Graduate School in Design. They're bringing that incredible level of experience and expertise now to make Louisville a better place. And like me, they've been inspired by that. It may just be a return to what Bert Hurley saw in West Louisville 75 years ago. The night's going to be ended with one of our favorite performances, Jacqui Blue, who's going to bring a musical performance to end After Hours and to bring an end to our year-long celebration of Loose Nuts, Bert Hurley's West End story. Thank you for joining us. If you missed part of it or want to revisit or share, just check out the Speeds channel on YouTube. And join us again next month for our 5th virtual After Hours. Thank you.
Good evening, Speed. My name is Rheonna Nicole, and I am the founder and creator of Lipstick Wars Poetry Slam. Lipstick Wars is a platform created to give a voice to women and girls through the art of slam poetry. Tonight, myself, Robin G., Jasmine Reed, and Diamond Roberts will be presenting poems to you. Poems about how we are feeling in this time, this sensitive time in our city. These poems are our protest. These poems are our testimonies. They are our truths. We hope you enjoy.
The title of this poem is called Open Letter to Christ the King, the only Black Catholic school in Louisville, Kentucky. Dear Archdiocese, it's been over 24 years since the last time you seen me. I bet you don't even remember me. My freshly greased scalp like an intersection between my light ponytails, held together by pink and white knockers and barrettes that dangle like sleeping willow trees. Hair accessories just chiming like ghetto wind chimes whenever I look to left or right. Remember when I peed my pants arch? Remember when the kids on the school bus never let me forget how ridiculous I was in kindergarten? You were the first guy school in the neighborhood where the Brown babies lived. The only school that didn't take God or prayer out. I had just got to the school, and after 1 year, you had enough of my pissy draws and ringing hair. Guess you had enough of my smart ass. Thought you'd teach me how to become church instead. Leave me to house the sick, evil, lost, and unsaved. To be thankful, the responsible stewardship of all God's gifts. Did you know that when I enrolled there, my mother had finally escaped my father's insecure hands? She was only trying to redeem her life so that my sisters and I could not learn how to cover black eyes. Did you know that when you took God from my textbooks, it left us with red eyes? I later found out when I was older, and I would ask my mama, what's the name of that school I went to when I was younger? She would tell me, and then she bowed her head in mourning. I later learned that not only was the Shawnee location the only black Catholic school in your network, but that we were the only Catholic school for the brown kids, and we were the only one you shut down. What do you have to say for yourself, Arch? Why did it take for the Jubilee year 2000 for you to forget the parish debt? Was it because the parish largely evolved as African Americans in the 1960s? You don't believe Jesus was black? Who was the closest thing to God you Catholics will ever be? You so deliberate, snatching God from his children. That year, you slammed the doors of possibilities in the face of a community who will later die for fun. Sincerely, a black girl who survived despite you.
My name is Diamond Roberts, and I am a local poet and activist from Lexington, Kentucky, who's recently been doing some traveling back and forth from Lexington to Louisville, just covering the protest and trying to get a feel for the energy that's in the air right now. And basically the conclusion that I came to was no matter how many words that I try to adequately string together to paint an image of what it's like living in the current state of our nation, sometimes words still fail. Living in a country with a history of ensuring that minorities undergo a number of traumas and oppression that we're unable to fully combat is mentally and spiritually taxing in more ways than one. But I will say that even in the midst of all of that, I've seen cities all over the country, from Louisville and Lexington to Detroit, come together and display an unshakable display of unity, community, and power. For the lives of George Floyd, David McAtee, Tony McCade, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so forth, I've truly seen tremendous beauty grow from concrete pain. 911 by Diamond Roberts. For if I birth the black child like my ancestors, I shall weep. I will cry me a river like the one the slave mother sacrificed her baby in for its freedom. This shit run deep. Tears runneth over, not from joy, but because I know that class and complexion is all they'll see. Not my gift to the world that grew inside of me. My name's William, not suspect, and words cut me deep. And Lord knows I don't want to give this world another black boy to mistreat. Seeing the potential prophecy for your child, I mean, what a conniption. And I don't want no son being born from my loins fitting the description, and having a daughter would be just as hard. Destroy a life like Asada or Sandra Blender when she get behind bars, or maybe even Rakia Boyder before they live under a system that caused us to bear scars. Badges and pistols rejoice in this system that I do not trust. I mean, does Lady Liberty wear a blindfold so she ain't got to watch what they be doing to us? I mean, right, left, right, every turn we make, patrol tailing us. Tense up, stay on your P's and Q's, seems like he's waiting on a slip up. Young black, we in this tinted car, they would never miss us. Kanye said, no matter what, you just a nigga in a coupe. And it seems like they just be saying, fuck de-escalation training, brown body target practice, they ready to aim and shoot. See the lights, my stomach drops. Red, white, blue, nothing more American than a slave patrol, killer cops, Black Panthers gone, but the Klan still exists. Racism still alive, they just be concealing it. And that's why when they in our neighborhoods, we tend to cut the lights and lock up the house, especially when it's summertime and they doing sweeps and wilding out. And it's hard for me to even care if they got good intentions or if it's your pops just because they dropped the still breath of freedom. And that's why I can't really jig with cops. And if you wonder why they harbor brown bodies all the time, it's because the 13th Amendment bans slavery except for punishment as a crime. Rewind. I said, if you wonder why they harbor brown bodies all the time, it's because the 13th Amendment bans slavery except for punishment as a crime. Know your rights, watch your back, and definitely free your mind.
Plywood windows to ensure the glass don't shatter, but baton sticks and pepper spray keep reminding us that Black lives don't matter and the blatant disrespect of a murdered Black woman is continuous. So fuck your cries for peaceful protest and protect us with the same energy in which you safekeep all this brick and mortar. See, a compassionate city drenched in the blood of Black people ain't gonna keep hearts warm. Concrete barricades may as well be Black bodies blocking traffic. It's tragic that ain't no safe space made for us, just locked doors and boards adorned with Black artwork meant to distract us from the fact that our worth is only measured by our skill set. See, this city's appetite for devastating Black lives and gaslighting the poor is atrocious, and Breonna Taylor's name ain't a scapegoat for gluttony. Faux allies hiding behind poster boards and Sharpies and local news outlets being made safe haven for racist comments. And we seem to be defending our constitutional right to folks who can't seem to differentiate a protest from a riot. We're always being made to keep quiet or seem bitter, code switching in white spaces, the silent concerns and the loud whispers and traumas constantly triggered and buildings being deemed more worthy than a Nah, this city ain't been feeling much like home to me because plywood windows are placed to ensure the glass don't shatter. But tasers and tear gas are constantly reminding us that Black lives still don't matter and the blatant disrespect of a murdered Black woman is continuous. So fuck your peaceful protests and protect us with the same energy in which you safekeep all this brick and mortar, because a compassionate city drenched in the blood of Black people ain't never gonna keep hearts warm.
My city has a ferocious appetite for hot browns and brown liquor. It sits high and mighty on its brown derby horse, gets full from its winnings, brown noses to fickle tourists, but forgets about the Black and brown bodies waiting for a seat at the table. Even now, it still enjoys the tedious taste of Kentucky Fried segregation, but expects everyone else to find nutrients in its regurgitated integration and opportunities from its empty bluegrass palate. There never seems to be enough rations to go around, but the same people are getting fed over and over again. I pretend like I ain't hungry though. Eat off the hearty pieces of my pride throughout the day. I sit impatiently waiting for more diversity-inclusive crumbs to fall from the greedy mouth of some white man who don't know nothing about the seasoning in my poems. This chop house of a town knows how to hide the plate so well. I guess in hopes that we don't try to bite the hand that barely feeds us. We should have just pulled ourselves up by our bootstrap napkins and made reservations to get some scraps from somewhere, anywhere. Just not there, right? At least I can always go back to my fast food desert. Not a lot of substance, but we make it stretch. Stretch like your wallet. You know, they're handing out free produce to us brown folk now. I suppose an apple a day keeps the protests away, or the poverty away, or the police away, or however that saying goes. But I like a fresh batch of greens and hot sauce with my pity. I wonder how many people do I have to serve before I get a decent meal. But never mind, no time to be selfish. Because in my city, we're getting ready for Derby. We're always getting ready for Derby.
Welcome to the Director's Cut Conversation at the Speed Museum's October After Hours. I'm Stephen Reily, and I am thrilled to be in the Speed's Loft Gallery right now with two important civic leaders, talking to them about their work and their reaction to the exhibit we're in right now. Loose Nuts, Bert Hurley's West End Story, is a celebration of a graphic novel created in 1933 by Bert Hurley, a Louisvillian who worked as an elevator operator for the L&N Railroad and was not well known in his lifetime as he should have been as an artist and musician. We've been excited to share all 128 pages of Loose Nuts with the community, and I'm excited to hear a perspective on it, again, from two community leaders. I'm really grateful they've joined me today. Lynnett Glass and Jeana Dunlap are the community investment specialists at the Louisville Coordinated Community Impact Project, and they each bring incredible background and experience and leadership to that role. Lynnett has both a master's in divinity and an MBA, so she brings a real healing perspective on urban development. Jeana, who's a Louisville native, who I've been lucky enough to know for a while, has worked in overseeing redevelopment in Louisville Metro, and then was awarded the incredibly prestigious Loeb Fellowship in urban design at Harvard's Graduate School of Design, where she went 2 years ago, right about now. Fortunately, the world was open then, so you had a really rich and exciting year as a Loeb Fellow, and now Louisville gets the benefit of you bringing that perspective back to us. And their project, I'll let them talk about, is figuring out how can we work better together to build a city we want to live in. I think of this exhibit being an example of you have to be able to envision the city you want to be in order to be it. And Bert Hurley certainly had a vision. We were talking earlier, and you introduced a word that I hadn't heard someone react to, the idea that this exhibit might be seen as fantasy. Why don't you maybe talk about that and how the problematic that is, and what the role of reality is to our perception of fiction or fantasy and kind of Black self-imagery?
Well, for us, I think because the work came out in the 1930s, it was right in the midst of that Harlem Renaissance and what was known as the New Negro movement, where there was a lot of Black intellectualism coming out, of Black artistry coming out. But we can understand in the 1920s and 30s why there was some reluctance to see African Americans in a different light. But to hear that word utilized in 2020 to describe this particular project is a challenge for me personally, because there's been a great deal of demonstration of what Black success has looked like over the years. There's been a great degree of Black success right here in Louisville. The lack of acknowledgement around that is a bit troubling.
Jeana, thoughts?
Well, I tend to look at this more as historical fiction. We've seen great stories told with some artistic license, and I feel like that's more accurate to describe what Mr. Hurley has done here, acknowledging, as Lynnett mentioned, that there have been many successful African Americans living a high, sophisticated lifestyle, even if those stories and that narrative haven't been played out so much in the public realm.
Yeah. I shared with you, Ed Hamilton said he called it, and when we did a walkthrough tour, a Black Great Gatsby, which is, again, historical fiction, but grounded in the reality of the Gilded Age or the fortunes of the 20s. No one said that was science fiction. It was fiction. What I've heard more, just my own, but this is my, limited of my perception, of people responding to the romance in this work. And I think even that, while it's not fantasy, it's a word that sadly isn't often used to depict the romance, the glamour, the sexiness, the silliness of this work. How do we, so a part of this project is to kind of re-inject reminder that's always present in life. How do you all think about that in your work?
Well, it's come up recently, the word monolithic as applied to African Americans or the Black experience in the United States. And everything that you just touched on, the humor, the romance, the mystery of it all, I think perfectly, if not accurately, describes what Black life and culture is comprised of. It's not the same for everyone. There's not one single journey or one single perspective. And unfortunately, the West End of Louisville, Black culture has been limited or relegated to a specific narrative. And I think this just reminds us, again, that we're not monolithic, and that there's a lot of diversity within the culture itself. And it's more than just struggle. It's more than just, combating racism. There's pure joy and love as well.
When we think about how, African Americans have been able to extract different lifestyles and create different instances of joy for all the duration of their life, in spite of the context that we're in, and that's America. I mean, I think you have to it forces you to acknowledge the resilience, the creativity, just the Black excellence that can never be argued with. It exists, period. And there's no way around that.
Yeah. It's almost like, as we were looking through the images, thinking that this crazy amount of creativity in Bert Hurley's brain, that almost every drawing he decided, what kind of artist do I want to be in this drawing? And then not knowing if it would ever be seen, right? There's a conversation going on even at the moment among Black artists who, there's a risk that they get pigeonholed in needing to be protest artists. And so and I use this as one of many examples or great examples. No, they need to be their artists. They need to be whatever kind of artist they want to be. And that almost is a way of denying the variety and the reality of their own, getting to think about how do they want to depict their lives.
I wonder if that was a conversation in Mr. Hurley's mind as well. Like, even though he was doing all this wonderful creative work, how he would be able to bring it into view for the public. I wonder what he had to struggle with at that time, what barriers he was thinking about needing to cross in order to get this work out at that time. And if it's still similar to what we're doing today.
I have a slightly different take now, having absorbed the work directly. And I wonder or question if that was even his goal, if this was more of a form of therapy and joy, like we might journal. And did he ever intend for it to be shared in a public realm? Because it's obviously deeply personal. And you mentioned there's only a few signatures of people that have gone through it. And so to me, that gives the sense that he was sharing it with people in an intimate way that he felt safe and secure and, free from judgment and validation that comes with the flip side of being, an artist on a commercial scale.
I think that's a really interesting point. There is a real intimacy in this work, and the fact that we know now that he was depicting all these people he knew, turning them into someone else. It's almost like sharing an album of a trip you took together, which it kind of was. It was a journey they were all on together. What's really interesting, I told you the story of his 83-year-old nephew who came, and we were all had tears in our eyes just about the idea of thinking about that full circle with Bert Hurley's journey. But we also talked about why stories like this were silenced. I mean, the story of this book, I don't know all the details, but it somehow left him maybe after he died, left his family and was found at a flea market or yard sale by a collector who later connected with the Speed that acquired it. I mean, I've been clear that the Speed was created by a woman, Hattie Bishop Speed, who was a pretty radical philanthropist. Her other big cause was the Red Cross Hospital, which was the only hospital where Black doctors had visiting privileges or Black women could give birth in a hospital. But she would not have viewed this as art worthy of the Speed Museum, I don't believe, in 1933. We do now. But how do we think about the context of Bert Hurley among hundreds of thousands, millions of stories that didn't see the light of day didn't make it out of that yard sale, didn't make it out of his apartment.
I mean, we all know and think about Muhammad Ali as the greatest.
Yeah.
Right? Well, he's from here, born and bred here. And so there's something I believe in the DNA of all Louisvillians. There's greatness that abounds all around us. The question is, do we ever get acknowledged or validated for it? People like Bryson Tiller, who probably is more famous outside of the city of Louisville than he is from his hometown. I think that happens more often than not. And I think it's really, important amongst us as locals to acknowledge our own greatness and not be deterred or fed by the fanfare in order to validate that greatness inside of us.
Also, I think that this insulation or this bubble that blocks the acknowledgement, the resistance to even being aware to the excellence that is born and bred here, that comes here, just the deep-seated, rooted resistance to that is something that we really have to work on, because you're going to continue to lose these invaluable stories, these memoirs, these important nuggets and capsules of history if we do not take the blinders off and acknowledge that it takes all kinds, and all kinds are among us, and they're all living amazing lives, and there's something to be gained from understanding all of that. It's important that we start to really look at our lens that we just don't want to release right now.
It's a long project, and a great way to start talking about you all's work. And because I think like this, that Bert Hurley's vision of his, and it was his vision of his West End and his love for his neighborhood and his people, reminds us that we don't have to look outside Louisville for the imagination, the creative ideas to help us see what we can be now. And so let's just talk a little bit about, for people who don't know, there's a wonderful, very realistic depiction of Walnut Street here.
Yes.
And what we had and what we lost here. Will you just tell that story?
Yeah, Old Walnut Street was renamed to Muhammad Ali Boulevard, but that was the center of the Black Business District in Louisville, Kentucky, and often known as, the Harlem to the South. Now, I've since heard there are lots of South Harlems all over the United States South, but we were a major regional hub, the only place that you could go and patronize Black-owned, Black-operated businesses where Black people were welcome, lived, and worked and patronized, because 4th Street wasn't so welcoming to people of color then. And unfortunately, as a outcome of urban renewal, all of that legacy, that history, the industry was wiped away, and pretty much laid the groundwork for what we see there today, more modern concrete buildings and paved over parking lots.
And lost as Black-owned businesses, as creative entrepreneurs who were keeping money in the community, raising families.
Absolutely.
There. Interesting to think about that, how that related to Union Station and the LNN. I hadn't really thought about before, because, that was kind of the heart of the city, and really thinking about Walnut Street kind of being between, where trains were the way basically everyone came into town, and being the lifeblood and kind of the blood flowing through the Black community and the white community in a much more vital way.
The trolley was a major issue. Sort of not unlike not Coretta Scott King, but
Rosa Parks.
On the bus. The same dynamics played out on our trolleys here in terms of people being able to get to work and where they rode, when they could ride. So transportation and logistics is a huge part of our fabric in general, not just for what we move, over and across the river, but how people move around throughout this community.
Right. And we saw in one of Bert Hurley's own images, the trolley tracks going down streets like Walnut, Market, Madison, Chestnut, and there was this east-west blood flow or flow of people and energy and commerce, just as there was north-south, and that all stopped.
I mean, the Kentucky Center for African American Heritage is an adaptively reused trolley shop.
Great reminder.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there are stories about, protest here locally. But again, like understanding that part of our past and access to transportation is still a huge issue today. Mobility and mobility, justice and mobility. Yeah.
So this work is, if you think of it, about showing what's already there, because I think you all probably have conversations with people think you're trying to create something from scratch in West Louisville rather than trying to bring it to life or enable it to fulfill its potential. Let's talk about the Coordinated Community Investment Project. And, if there's anything it doesn't have to be about Bert Hurley, but if there's anything about this that resonates for your work, but I want to hear just a little bit and share the stories of what you all are doing. Such important work, and your leadership and vision for the community is going to make a difference.
I think for me, the Louisville Coordinated Community Investment Project is really about lifting up assets that are already in the community, as well as acknowledging the long and enduring barriers that need to come down in order to make sure that we capitalize and infuse as much energy into those assets as possible. We have amazing people on the ground who have been doing the work for years, but they have missed opportunity after opportunity, or not missed it, but necessarily been denied access to these opportunities that would allow them to grow that work in order to have a greater impact. There are so many solutions just waiting to be infused with the right amount of support, but because it doesn't come with the right name attached or the right face attached to it, it gets discarded, much like this work. It was found at a yard sale.
Yeah.
An invaluable piece of history for Louisville found on the table at a yard sale. That is the thing that we have got to, and we pride ourselves on working to make sure that we can get in front of and maybe even intervene in to make sure it's not happening to the detriment of so many families and lives in the areas that we're serving.
Yeah, for the size that Louisville is, it's interesting how long we can go without seeing people that we know are here and live here. And that dynamic plays out across the various sectors of community investment, whether that's the financial services industry, the public sector, philanthropy, or corporate. We don't talk so much, or at least we're learning, Lynnett and I have learned that the lines of communication, authentic and candid communication, are somewhat limiting. So we serve as connective tissue to get those conversations going. And quite frankly, I feel like, we're taking the conversation further along equity. So not just access and fairness, but actual value and wealth creation. And the return on our investment in this project is a return to greatness. Right. So, what's presented here in this display is reminiscent of what we actually had in the West End 100 years ago. And I'd love to see us really be intentional about reclaiming that legacy and living out that life and that lifestyle in a new era.
Well, with you all leading the charge as our connective tissue, I'm optimistic, but we need you more than ever. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Steve, for the invitation. It's been delightful.
Well, I love spending time with you. This was fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
about the past. Hear that ringing, waits for nothing. The baby tones, feel it deep in your soul. It's time, it's time. It's time, it's time to run to the rock. Yeah. Time. Yeah. Wise man told me, watch the time while his grandfather clocked the key he'd wind. Remember, remember, remember that wealth will never stop. That clock won't promise health. Tick tock, watch the clock. 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 He said a tick tock, well, watch the clock. He said a tick tock, watch the clock. You better run to the rock. And all you
Time. Did you ever think about time? I can almost hear it. Boy, you know it is. Oh, you know it is. Then where are we, my friend? I want to hear that song. That song about time. Time, Smith. I want to hear that song. That song about time. Time, song about time.
There's no time. No time. There's never any time. I don't have time.
That's what this is. Time.
watch the clock. Tick tock, watch the clock. Tick tick tock, watch the clock. Tick tick tock, watch the clock. Tick tick tock, watch the clock.
That song. I want to hear that song. That song about time. Song about time. Song about time. Song about time. Song about
Rockets, moonshots, spin it on the have-nots. Money, we make it. Before we see it, you take it. Oh, makes me wanna holler the way they do my life. Yeah, makes me wanna holler the way they do my life. This ain't living. No, no, baby, this ain't living. No. Da 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 da. Inflation,
no chance to increase finance. Bills pile up, sky high. Send that boy off to die. Oh, makes me wanna holler and throw up both my hands. Yeah, makes me wanna holler and throw up both my hands. Ow! Crime is increasing. Trigger happy policing. Panic is spreading. God knows where we're heading. Oh, makes me wanna holler and throw up both my hands. Yeah, makes me wanna holler and throw up both my hands. Ow! Can we pretend that from now on there is no yesterday? Paint a portrait of tomorrow with no colors from today. There's a light that shines in your face sometime that takes my feeling and wraps them around your knees. But there's a shadow hiding in your heart sometimes that takes my feelings, turn back in on me. Can we pretend the pain is gone and go our merry way? Paint a portrait of tomorrow with the colors bright and gay. There's a light that shines in your face sometime that takes my feeling and wraps them around your needs. But there's a shadow hiding in your heart sometimes that makes my feeling turn back in on me. Can we pretend? Can we pretend? Can we pretend? Can we pretend? my darling one, so brave, so strong. Beneath your smile, a sad song. I often find that many are blind, even with eyes wide. But I always see you, and I always hear your heart's invisible tears. So take my hand, no suffering on your own. It's heavy, all that loneliness and fear cuts to the bone. And love, my love, just hold on and always know the storms won't last. This too shall pass, and still I won't let go. You belong, you're mine, through space and time. That special one in all the galaxies. Don't feel alone, my girl, my soul. 'Cause in the end, we banish our woes. But I always see you, and I always hear your heart's invisible tears. So take my hand, no suffering on your own. It's heavy, all that loneliness and fear cuts to the bone. And love, my love, just hold on and always know the storms won't last. This too shall pass, and still I won't let go. No. Take my hand, no suffering on your own. It's heavy, all that loneliness and fear cuts to the bone. And love, my love, just hold on and always know the storms won't last. This too shall pass, and still I won't let go. Take my